This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon, and we're coming on the air because we're about to witness a moment never before seen in American history. A former president indicted on criminal charges, now moments away from surrendering to authorities right here in New York City. Former President Donald Trump, a short time from now, will be arraigned. He'll be brought before a judge in Lower Manhattan. And of course, you're looking live at Trump Tower, the scene outside Trump Tower, where at any minute the former president, who of course is now running for president for a third time, will emerge and will make his way down to the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. In fact, our reporting team tells us he's actually in the elevator in Trump Tower, making his way down right now. He'll travel through Midtown Manhattan, escorted by the Secret Service and the NYPD. It's about a 4-mile trip to criminal court in Lower Manhattan. When he gets there, he's expected to be brought into the courthouse rather quickly, brought into an elevator there, straight up to the 15th floor. It's our understanding that there will be cameras in the hallway when he gets off the elevator, but not in the courtroom. The Trump team had argued last night against television cameras in court, the Trump team saying that it would create a circus-like atmosphere. The camera right there, though, trained on Trump Tower, the former president expected to emerge at any moment. Now, in the courtroom, we also know it's believed there will be still cameras to capture images right before the proceedings. The first president, former or current, to ever face criminal charges. The former president spent the night in Trump Tower, we're told, huddled with his legal team, preparing for what is about to come. In fact, our Catherine Falder's reporting a short time ago that the former president is expected to plead not guilty himself, not his lawyers in court, that he will speak himself in court. The indictment still sealed, but the former president and the public set to learn just a short time from now what charges the former president will face. Sources have already told ABC News, as we've been reporting for several days here, that he'll face more than 24 separate charges, all stemming from that investigation into the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, all for her to keep quiet in the crucial final weeks before the 2016 presidential election. The payment, as you likely know, was made by his then lawyer, his fixer, his one-time friend, Michael Cohen, who, of course, was convicted and served prison time for this. Michael Cohen, now a central witness in this case. Cohen knows that he's become a target of Trump and his supporters, but he has repeatedly said that there will be evidence to back up everything he has told prosecutors in this case. Again, you're looking live. The pictures are cameras trained outside Trump Tower. Obviously, you see movement there, the Secret Service, the NYPD, for this 4-mile trip down to Lower Manhattan. Police have, of course, locked down security around Trump Tower and the courthouse, where we have seen a small number of Trump supporters gathered. In fact, so far, our reporters have noted often the number of reporters actually outnumbering those who have gathered. And so now we watch the motorcade on the move here in Manhattan. Lindsay Davis outside Trump Tower. Lindsay, what have you seen?
David, if you blinked, you would have missed his departure. He gave a brief wave to the crowd and then got right into that motorcade. I think that a lot of people who are gathered here along Fifth Avenue are not even aware that he has already departed the building, because people are still holding up cameras trying to perhaps get a glimpse of the former president. Fifth Avenue, as you know, has long been a coveted address with high-end buildings, and today, clearly, that's not the draw. We have maybe 10 people deep just on the other side of the camera here lining Fifth Avenue. Many of the people here, tourists. It is remarkably peaceful, very quiet here, people just watching. I started kind of just asking as I was walking down Fifth Avenue, you know, why are you here? Are you a Trump supporter? The majority of the people said they're not Trump supporters, some giving some choice words explaining that they were anti-Trump. There was a little girl, 10 years old, who said that he's a mean man who's done bad things, and she wanted to see him go to jail today. But again, because it's an international crowd, it's interesting. A lot of the people seem to really not have a strong opinion about it. You have a handful of people maybe who have signs in support of Trump, but even they are not protesting in any way. Certainly a historic day for Americans. The native New Yorker who grew up here and found a lot of fame and prominence here in New York City, returning here to what was once his primary residence. But for this day, of course, to face the judge, and be fingerprinted. But interestingly, David, as you know, he had urged his supporters to protest, suggesting that there might be potential death and destruction. We are seeing none of that. Mayor Adams, of course, warned people that New York City stands at the ready and said to any potential rabble-rousers to behave. It seems that people are doing just that, David.
Lindsay Davis outside Trump Tower, and as Lindsay aptly put it, if you blinked, you missed it. The former president leaving Trump Tower very quickly, getting into the motorcade. Again, the Secret Service assisting, but the NYPD taking the lead here today as they make that 4-mile trip now down to Lower Manhattan and to criminal court. Obviously, it will not take nearly as long as it would take on a typical day in Manhattan. Traffic has been cleared away. So have pedestrians in many parts of New York to make this trip as efficient as possible for the former president in making his way to Lower Manhattan. We are getting new reporting this morning on what will play out this afternoon here in New York. Our senior investigative reporter, Aaron Katersky, live outside the courthouse. Aaron, take us through what we know so far, what the American people will witness, what we won't see, and how this arraignment will unfold here.
David, former President Trump is on his way here to surrender as the defendant in the People of the State of New York against Donald J. Trump. He's going to arrive here at the criminal courthouse through a side entrance that has already been blocked off in anticipation of his arrival. All of the cars, including the district attorney's vehicle, have been cleared from the block so the president can come in unencumbered. He's immediately going to be taken inside to the district attorney's office for processing, where he will be formally placed under arrest and processed and booked as a criminal defendant. A short time later, he will be taken to the 15th floor to a courtroom where he will be arraigned. We're told he's going to use a special elevator ordinarily reserved for the judges, and that will put him right at the entrance to the courtroom, so he may only be in the hallway a few minutes, just mere steps. Once inside, he will be seated in the well of the courtroom, and that is something the American people have never seen. A former occupant of the Oval Office seated at the defense table of a criminal courtroom, surrounded by his lawyers, Susan Necklace and Todd Blanche, a former federal prosecutor who was recently added to the defense team. There will be no television cameras inside. The judge wouldn't allow it. But, David, he is allowing a number of photographers to snap pictures for a few minutes before the arraignment begins. So we will undoubtedly see the former president seated there. And I'm curious about some of these dynamics. Ordinarily, a president of the United States is the most important person in the room. Everybody stands in honor of his arrival. Here, he will have to stand when Judge Juan Merchan comes on the bench to preside over his arraignment, David.
An extraordinary scene Aaron Katersky describes that will unfold in Lower Manhattan just moments from now. For those of you joining us, this is ABC News live coverage of what is history in the making. Never before have we seen a president, former or current, criminally charged on the trip to Lower Manhattan to criminal court to face those charges. He'll be arraigned moments from now. Of course, you're looking at the East River. The FDR is the route taken by the NYPD and the Secret Service. There have been some questions earlier in the day. Would it be Fifth Avenue, which is a straight trip right down to Lower Manhattan, the 4-mile trip, or would they take him over to the FDR? And of course, we all know that this is, before Mar-a-Lago became his home, New York City was the home of Donald Trump for many, many decades, born, raised here. This is all very familiar territory, and you can only imagine a bit surreal for him, even for someone who has faced multiple tests in decades as a businessman and then as the president of the United States. Legal tests along the way, but never has he faced a test like this one here that begins today. Criminal charges to be arraigned for those charges just moments from now. I want to bring in John Santucci, who has reported on Donald Trump for many years for us. John, you were the one reporting that he was coming down the elevator at Trump Tower. Any more color on the mood of the former president and the Trump team as they now head to Lower Manhattan to defend the former president?
A little bit, David, and I have to be honest, things don't usually shock me, but it looks like Donald Trump is actually in this vehicle by himself. He's with his agents, but usually Donald Trump has an aide, his lawyers, somebody by his side. I'm being told in real time the former president is by himself with his Secret Service detail, which is surprising given everything we've heard, David, within the last 24 hours, is that Donald Trump has been surrounded by people. He's back in his residence. You mentioned Trump Tower, a place that he lived for quite some time. I'm told last night that for many hours he was flanked by throngs of lawyers, lawyers that are working on this case, lawyers that have worked for him from some time at the Trump Organization, and lawyers that are also involved in the special counsel's investigation down in Washington. That is a two-pronged probe, as you well know, looking at January 6th and documents. I'm also told that a lot of phone calls from Trump last night and this morning, people described him to me, David, as quite calm. Our colleague, Catherine Falders, hearing he was upbeat as he was working the phone last night. I had another aide who told me that, as we've reported here on ABC, Donald Trump, post-White House, has become a frequent texter. And he was texting people last night saying, how do you think this is going to go today? What about the latest poll numbers? It seemed to be, David, as one aide put it to me, business as usual on a day that is anything but usual.
In addition to that reporting, John, Catherine Falders also indicating that the former president will plead not guilty himself.
That is our understanding, David. He will be in court surrounded by two lawyers, both familiar to the Trump team, if you will. Susan Necklace, who represented him and the company when they were facing the Manhattan DA last year in their probe, looking at their failure to pay taxes for employees and other individuals. And another attorney who just formally joined Team Trump, Todd Blanche. He worked, of course, with Paul Manafort in their defense against special counsel Robert Mueller's probe, of course, when the president was in the White House.
John Santucci, who reported off air on the Trump campaign leading up to 2016 and then on the Trump years in the presidency. John, our thanks to you with us all afternoon here, along with Catherine Falders and our entire political team standing by. Also, our reporters from New York City to Washington to West Palm Beach, where the president will end this day, the former president. And he is set in Mar-a-Lago to brief reporters again at the end of this historic day, though even though they've worked on what he will say, likely that could be tweaked given the temperature of what plays out in this courtroom here this morning. This is a surreal scene we're watching, Jonathan Karl, a live picture of the motorcade carrying Donald Trump. And as John just reported, Santucci there a moment ago, the former president alone with his Secret Service agents on the way down. This is not typical for the former president, who's usually surrounded by a small team that truly supports him.
Yeah, an incredible moment. This is a guy who's been the subject of countless criminal investigations, civil lawsuits, on down the line, certainly his entire time in politics, but before that as well. But now he is going to be booked the same way a common criminal will be booked at the courthouse on 100 Center Street in Lower Manhattan, a place where drug dealers and petty criminals of all kinds are regularly processed. And this time it'll be a former president. Truly a moment in this saga. But you know, I think to John's point, Trump has seen some other things happen over the past few days. One thing, that there have been polls that have come out that show him widening his lead over Ron DeSantis. He's raised, his team claims, $8 million since the indictment was revealed on Thursday. So this is now not just a criminal defendant facing this case and other cases, but a presidential candidate who is going to make fighting these indictments the centerpiece of his presidential campaign.
And we're going to carefully take our viewers through all of this as we're on the air here this afternoon. And as we look at this live picture, Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice correspondent, it also speaks to when you see that this is all that's on the highway right now. You never see this in New York City, particularly at this hour. Obviously, this is the motorcade, the Secret Service, and the New York City Police Department hard at work here today. And all of the officers, some 35,000, put on heightened alert given what's playing out.
Absolutely, David. They have been planning for this for days. The Secret Service was in meetings with New York City officials over the weekend. And one official with the Secret Service I spoke to said that, look, we're confident we can get the president to where he needs to be quickly. We have the General Assembly here where there are hundreds of foreign dignitaries. We can do this. They're taking no chances. That route, as you can see, has been blocked off. I'm told around the courthouse you won't be able to get anywhere near the courthouse, whatever. But the bottom line is they feel very confident that the crowds that you will see today will be largely peaceful, in part because of the message sent after January 6th. More than 1,000 people arrested. Many of them have been getting significant prison terms. And they believe that is a message of deterrence.
They're convinced that's a significant deterrent, particularly after what the country saw, what the world saw, and then the punishment that followed, even though it's taken many months. They have continued with all of those cases, and Pierre, you've reported extensively on that. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but as Pierre and as Lindsay pointed out at Trump Tower, for the most part, the people outside Trump Tower were tourists who likely will never forget when they chose to visit New York, given the fact that they were outside Trump Tower when he came out very briefly, got into that motorcade. And again, if you looked away, you missed it. That motorcade again on the way down to criminal court, as John Carl just pointed out. There he is. This is the moment. A fist pump to the crowd. Lindsay saying that many of them, again, tourists, some not supporting the former president, though we're sure there were supporters there as well. And now the live picture downtown as they approach criminal court. And I think it was Aaron Katersky in the last 24 hours who spoke to the juxtaposition of this sort of luxury penthouse in Trump Tower, trading that this morning for sort of the hardened building of criminal court. Early this afternoon, where he'll now face arraignment. I want to bring in our legal analysts, Dan Abrams and Kate Shaw. And Kate, I want to begin with you just about the history being made this afternoon as we watch this unfold here in New York. Regardless of what you feel about the case, there's no questioning the fact that we simply have never witnessed anything like this.
No, so Donald Trump, of course, has faced all sorts of legal, obstacles. He's had civil suits when he was in business. He was twice impeached, tried in the Senate. But of course, there's never been a criminal case against, President or former President Donald Trump or any other president or former president in our history. It is monumental from a historical perspective. And yet it's important to remember right now, Donald Trump is an ex-president and he's just a private citizen. He's running for president. Of course, that's true too. But as a formal legal matter, he's someone subject to the criminal jurisdiction of the Manhattan DA or any other, law enforcement entity, just like anyone else. So it's enormously consequential historically. But it also, I think, speaks to this, equal justice under law principle that right now he is being booked like any other criminal defendant. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty like any other criminal defendant. And so you have the juxtaposition of those two, I think, dynamics.
And as we watch now, as the former president gets out and heads into the building there in Lower Manhattan, again, I know it's difficult to see from these aerial images, but we'll take you through it carefully, the moments that we are able to see. There had been some question about whether or not he would speak, even if briefly, before heading into the courthouse. Of course, we will bring that to you if and when that happens. Otherwise, we'll just take you right through the proceedings here this morning. And Kate Shaw, a question I know a lot of people at home are going to have. Does this preclude in any way this indictment or even this notion of the potential conviction that could come or not if this is thrown out along the way? Does this in any way preclude him from running for president and even winning in 2024?
In a word, David, no. Nothing in the Constitution, nothing in the law prevents an individual under indictment or even under sentence from running for president or even serving for president. There might, of course, be logistical obstacles that a pending criminal prosecution would pose. And of course, if there were a conviction, arrangements would have to be made if, in fact, he were to win the presidency in the interim. But all you have to be is 35, natural-born citizen, resident for 14 years to run for president. This doesn't impact his eligibility one bit.